Good morning, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. Today, my guest is Natasha Trivers. She's the CEO of Democracy Prep, network of schools in New York and other parts of the country. I've known them always as being a New York set of schools, but in prep for the show today, I realized that they're not just in New York. They're also in Baton Rouge and San Antonio and other places in the country. They have over 6,500 students, which makes them twice the size of the average American school district. So when people talk about how, we can't scale up charter schools, well, this is a charter school network that is twice the size of the average American district. So there you go. Natasha is the CEO of the network, but previous to that, she had also been a principal, an assistant principal, a superintendent, an overachiever, someone who just likes to do way too much with her time, and also she's a welcome addition to, I think, leadership of the charter school networks across the country, because we definitely need more people of color leading and running networks of schools, because that becomes our laboratory for figuring out what can be done for our kids. And I think people of color are very desirous of new opportunities, new hope, something different than what we've had for years. Natasha, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And I'm going to go ahead and shout out Las Vegas and Camden, too, because I got to say all 5 regions right now. I want to get into
So who else did you say now? Is that Camden, New Jersey?
Yep. Camden, New Jersey and Las Vegas, Nevada.
Okay. Wow. Okay. And you said Nevada. You didn't say Nevada. All right. Wow.
I said Nevada my first week on the ground there. And the he was like, listen, New York. Nevada. I was like, all right. Okay.
There are 3 places like this. Funny you mentioned it. 3 places like that. So Nevada and Nevada. If you go to Eugene, Oregon, there's 2 different ways of saying Eugene. Yeah, and I get it. I say it the wrong way every time I talk to anyone from there. And Spokane, Washington is the other place that I say wrong every single time. So yeah, but I'm committed to being wrong sometimes. How are you doing as an educator, as somebody who is leading in a very difficult time? How are you doing with your work at Democracy Prep?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Chris. I am doing well, and I think our educators are doing well too. We are gearing up to relaunch hybrid in New York on Monday. And then we are launching hybrid for the first time in Las Vegas on the 15th, and the first time in Camden, New Jersey on the 15th as well. So we are, educators right now are being heroes, and we are working really, really hard to just make sure that we provide the best educational opportunities for our students and the best supports for our families right now.
When the pandemic started about a year ago, everything was new and it was really disruptive. Yeah. And people were scrambling. Do you feel like you've kind of gotten out of the scrambling phase and some things are starting to work just like normal? Not like normal, but you know what I mean? Like, are you settled into what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think we're really settled in, and I think we have learned so much in terms of being innovative with technology, of being nimble, responding quickly to the needs of teachers in the moment. Like what Pear Deck training do they need? What training about another platform? On the other hand, though, the virus just keeps throwing more like wrenches at us, right? So we were excited that educators were in Group 1B in New York several weeks ago for the vaccine. And then as people started to try to just get their vaccine appointment, it was all kinds of shenanigans and opaque processes of how this is going to happen. People would get an appointment and then it would be canceled. So we feel like in March, folks are having a much easier time now. There have been new sites opening up, especially in the Bronx and Mount Vernon, Yonkers, other areas where they were hard to come by. So we're on the right track, but I mean, it's never a dull moment.
With my team at Brightbeam, and I want to shout out Brightbeam because we're a great place to work. At my team with Brightbeam, one of the things that I haven't been able to always have a handle on, but I've been always interested in, is are we always pushing our people to be at 100? Because you can't run an organization when everybody every day is running on 100, right? Like, So haven't had a real great way of keeping a handle on that, except for just to kind of do gut checks. But do you feel like because you're a public school network that receives just public school funding, that it's been real hard not to run everybody on 100 and run real lean? Are you close to ever worrying about burnout with your folks?
Yeah, always, always. I think we are as a network have been on 100 since the beginning and asking people
Hmm.
to. And I think part of the work recently, and a lot of it has sort of bubbled up from educators on the ground in some really positive ways, is like we want people to stay in the work. We know teachers make
Hmm.
magic happen for kids. Excellent teachers who are well prepared, who like spend their time like really internalizing their lesson and employing culturally relevant pedagogy for their student population, they make it happen. But if they're getting burnt out and we're, attriting
Hmm.
staff and having to hire new staff and develop new staff, that's not best by kids and it's not best by our people. So
Hmm.
we actually built into our multi-year strategic plan for the future when I came on board as CEO, like one of the priorities is sustainability. And elements of it is like, how do we make sure our people are okay and this is sustainable
Hmm.
for them? And the work is urgent. And so I feel like I'm on 100 every day because it is urgent work. But if we're burning people out, then we're taking steps back on behalf of our kids and our mission. So we can't do that. We have to get better there for sure.
Are you noticing the stress in families?
Yeah, I think our families have been, and we can always do a better job of this, but I think they have been very just like candid in their feedback to us, right? Like this is the first time they're able to see their child's education up close and personal, like on a daily
Hmm.
basis, and
Hmm.
see like even we have high expectations, of course. Like I will never apologize for that. But at the same time, during a pandemic, we've had families reach out and say, I think this amount of homework is unreasonable, or I think, this specific expectation during class time when I'm juggling three different kids joining remotely right now in the same house is just not reasonable. And I'm so grateful that our families have given us that candid feedback in town halls, in one-on-one sessions, et cetera. So I think they're definitely feeling the stress and the strain, but I hope they feel like they have an
Hmm.
open mind to tell us though, and to push us to be better.
I wonder about you just raised a question for me. So, democracy prep, part of your ethos is providing opportunities for democracy, for training young people to be prepared for democracy,
Yep.
which I think is an amazing focus because I think it's missing. And we're seeing it all across the country and other like these spats that we see come up about curriculum and what's being taught
Yep.
and, how students participate. Even some students are even filming their teachers engage in some real anti-democratic type stuff. So
Yep.
it's cool to see a school like yours and a network like yours where democracy is front center. In your marketing materials I looked at, and I saw that it said that you guys have an idea that low income people don't have enough kind of access and preparation and participation in civics and in their civic society.
Yep.
When you just mentioned that about parents, it raised a question for me very practically. How are your parents engaging in the democracy of running a democracy prep network?
Yeah. I'll be honest, I think we're getting better at that, in the past couple of years of making sure that we are embracing this spirit of like collaboration and there are multiple stakeholders in a child's
Mm.
education. It should not just be me deciding or the superintendent deciding or educators deciding. We have to partner with our families. But I'll be honest, 10 years ago at Democracy Prep, I can't say that we did a fantastic job of engaging our families and showing them how much we value them and how much we see them as like experts on their children and like true partners in this process. I think
Mm.
we've gotten better in the recent years, and then I endeavor to get even better over the next several years of just doing that, and also embracing our alums and our students as like key stakeholders as well, for sure.
I had a chance to see some of your students not long ago. You guys invited me in for a discussion with some of your students. I was amazed just by how promising our next generation is. Just amazed by how bright and just good, they're just good people. and
Yeah.
you want the best for them every single day. Does it kind of ever get to you as an educator as time goes on that you feel a vested interest in them and you know the world's not fair? You know their city isn't even fair. Does it ever gnaw at you, gnaw at your heart, or does it make you just want to work harder to make sure that they're prepared?
Both. It definitely gnaws at my heart. We had a death of a student, shooting incident in December, right after my birthday, and right before Christmas in the month of December. And I think that, and just so many other things in the larger society that are stacked up against our students in some ways, definitely gnaws at my heart. But we also have some amazing educators who like make it their business to teach about systems of inequity, to teach about racism, ramifications of slavery, the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, Black Panthers. Like, our teachers do such an amazing job of teaching our students about like movements for social change, and also to remind them how powerful and how brilliant they are and how they're going to be change agents in their own right. And so that's like my antidote to being
So it's
worried.
not taxing you. It's not like, it does gnaw at your heart, but it's not going to drain you to the point at some point where you're kind of like soul bare and not able to keep going.
I hope not. I hope not.
Yeah, I worry about that with educators. I really worry about whether or not they're able to. I mean, because you love your students so much and you see in them all the possibilities in life, and then you know that the world's not fair.
Yeah.
The world that they're entering.
Yeah.
William Conrad is asking you some questions here in the comments.
Oh,
These are all, yeah. So William Conrad wants to know, what are your academic goals for your students? He's got a compound. William, I'm going to tell you right now, this is a compound question. That's when you ask multiple questions. I don't know if you want to tackle any of this, but he wants to know about academic goals for students. Sure. And do you have expectations for professional practices for teachers, like the use of explicit instruction and the use of formative assessment? Conrad, you are saying a mouthful here. Does any of that make anything you want to touch there?
Yeah, in terms of I'll start with the expectations for students, and then I might need you to repeat the professional question. I think it's a very good one, but it's a rich one. For students, we have lots of academic expectations. I'd like to boil it down. Like, we want our kids to be successful after high school on the path that they choose, right? And for the majority of our students, we do think that is to and through a 4-year college or university. Doesn't mean it's the only path, but for the majority of our students, that's the path they select. So that means it's a college preparatory environment. We expect our students to be great writers. We expect them to be able to be great researchers and do research presentations and the like. We expect them to sort of have under their belt all of the sort of like college prep kind of course material, physics, algebra 2, be ready to hang in calculus when they go to college, that kind of thing. So we have a lot of academic expectations, and we do believe in the use of formative and summative assessments so that we can check ourselves on how we're doing in making sure kids master content.
Are you still doing the assessments this year?
Yeah, so we are still doing our own internal interim assessments. And of course, in the regions where there will be a state exam this year, we are still prepping for our students to take the state exam and to do their best and to demonstrate growth. That matters a lot to us.
I'm getting so annoyed about the conversation about standardized testing and the assessments, and the sense that states might be taking what I've been calling a data vacation. Just saying, well, pandemic, so maybe we shouldn't do any testing. One school of thought on that is, testing doesn't tell us anything we don't know. Testing is inherently biased. Testing is not something that's useful to educators, and so on and so on. The other side of the fence for me is testing does tell me something I don't know as a parent. We get the testing results from the state, and we look at it as a parent and as parents, and we are told something by that. Like, it does give us something to talk with our educators about. Where are you falling down on whether or not you think it's appropriate that the states are still wanting to test? And even the president, I think, is on record of still wanting annual state testing to occur.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely the right call. There has to be annual standardized tests. We have to understand the context and not use it in sort of a high stakes way against a school system or a district in terms of how students perform, but it should be our litmus test for like how much learning has been lost. We know learning has been lost no matter what the format of instruction in your school or school system. Some learning has been lost during this pandemic for our students. There's no question. So we need to know, what have they retained? What don't they know? What do we need to work on? And I agree that a standardized test is not the only way to glean what a child knows and doesn't know, but it's an important barometer for us at the school system level, at the city level, state level, et cetera. I think in terms of annual tests like this spring, like what I would just ask from the powers that be is that they allow school systems to administer tests safely. And if in a particular district or school system, the city and the system is saying that that is best done virtually, then that should be what rules the day, as opposed to an in-person assessment for students. But we are gearing up for in-person. So if assessments are in person, we will work out a schedule that makes that happen. I just worry about families that would rather keep their child home, and we're keeping that remote option. Then those families should have an option for their child to take the test virtual as well.
Yeah, I think I heard a little bit yesterday about some of the concerns people have is just even about the delivery. How are you going to be able to make it work? Yeah. I was watching the DC school board last night, and that was what came up was like, how can you do it with fidelity? For one, families are all over the place. They have such low attendance that they're going to miss a lot of kids, as a matter of fact, in their entire system. So, yeah. But I actually I'm sick of systems not wanting to know the bad news.
Yeah, because Chris, what you just said is a data point, right? Like if we can't even get kids to attend to take the test, that's a data point that's a data point,
right? Yeah, I want to know that as a public person, I want to know, or as a community organizer, you would want to know: are the kids in your community, are parents having trouble getting them to school? And what we do know, we've covered a little bit on this show before, is that there's a result to that too. Is they're starting to criminalize families and kids in some cases. Yeah. So communities, pay attention to all the data. Want all the data. It's like going to the doctor and saying, okay, listen, bruh, don't tell me nothing about the blood pressure. So I'm not going to take that test. I don't want to know because I'm having a real bad time right now. I feel like my blood pressure is high. Yeah. Imagine telling the doctor you don't want to take the blood pressure test because your blood pressure is high. You're having a rough time. Right. He'd look at you like, do you want to die? Right. Right. It makes no sense.
The other analogy I've heard is just like, are standardized tests the root of evil? Well, let's talk about driving. Like we all rely on a standardized test for people to prove that to be on the road, right? They should be driving. So to just have these sort of, this binary about standardized tests doesn't make any sense to me.
So I want to go through a couple of your pillars to see how they're holding up during the pandemic. So one of them is that you all offer more time to learn in normal times, like in normal times at Democracy Prep you do. Is that still holding true? And part of this is going to come from jealousy because my remote learning is getting, not just are we not getting more time to learn, we're getting less instruction by far. We're getting daily just a fraction of the normal time we would have got. So is more time to learn still holding up for you all?
Yeah, so our school day is still 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Right now, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Wednesday is our asynchronous day where kids are assigned work, but they can do it at their own pace. And even when we launch hybrid, teachers will be working remotely on Wednesdays. So in a typical school year, it's like 7:30 to 4:30. In our remote world, it's 8 to 4. So we've shaved off a little bit of time, but not a lot. And we're still offering tutoring sessions that are really individualized to student needs within the school day. So that's within that 8 to 4 p.m. school day.
Wow. So if there were, for instance, somebody in Minnesota that wanted to enroll in Democracy Prep, since you guys are remote, how does that work?
That's a great question. I'd have to pitch that to our authorizer, SUNY, and find out, are we able to provide an education across state lines?
You should pitch that one. Or else you're going to have people who just start lying about their address. I know people in New York, so we can make it happen. The another pillar is rigor.
Yeah.
So are you all maintaining your strong focus on college-bound rigor in your academics?
Absolutely. Our mantra is like we are preparing kids for success in the college of their choice. They may choose not to go to a 4-year college or university and do a coding camp or an apprenticeship, and
Mhm,
we will certainly celebrate that and support them on that path. But the program is going to prepare them for success in college. And I've seen over my lifetime, especially in the New York context, some schools shift to, well, we have to create other paths for kids, which I'm totally down
mhm,
with.
mhm,
But then the ripple effect is curriculum is really watered down, and kids are told in ninth grade, like, oh, you're on the vocational track. You can do this or that, but then never be prepared for calculus. And that's not our model. We will
mhm.
prepare every kid to be able to persist through college, whether it's their choice at the end or not.
Yeah, it seems like the college or bust part of the charter school movement has been under fire a lot for
Yeah,
missing things like CTE and community college, of which those are a lot more rigorous now. I don't know if people know this, but like if you
absolutely.
want to become an auto mechanic these days, you're not going to be an illiterate auto mechanic, that's for sure. It
Yep,
requires more skills than it ever did before. But you
absolutely.
guys are like, listen, that should be your choice. It shouldn't be your only option.
Yeah, and I'd say probably 10% of our graduates each year go to a community college. Some of them
Mm,
then move on to a 4-year college or university, and some of them don't. Right now, my son, who's a Democracy Prep alum, he went to Morehouse for his freshman year, and he's taking a gap year now and enrolling at Westchester Community College and working. And that you're right, Chris. Like there are rigorous programs in community colleges across the country, and a lot of licensing programs and things that are going to give young people a foot in the door into industries they want to be in, and they still may pivot back to a 4-year college or university after that. So we prepare them for 4-year college or university, but
mhm.
we certainly celebrate other paths as well.
There's a question here from Joshua Israel Stewart, who I happen to know, who asks, is Democracy Prep one of those schools that stays involved with alums who get to college? And do they provide help with students with dealing with things like financials and making sure that they get to graduation?
Yeah, Josh, thank you for that question. We do. We have an alumni captain program where basically a current Democracy Prep alum who's enrolled in a college across the country is a captain, and they call, text, email their kind of cohort of other alums that are in college. They check
Mm.
in with them about grades, they check in with them about social emotional stuff. How are you doing? What classes are a struggle? And I'll tell you, it is a lot better than me reaching out or our VP of College Success reaching out. We're the old people. They don't want to hear from us. They don't want to share their transcript with me, but
Yeah.
here they're definitely supportive. And then we have a micro grant program too for funding as well.
What are some of the learnings that you have out of that, out of being in touch with the students that are in college now? What have you
Yeah.
learned about what they're going through? I'd be interested to know, like, what are some of the recurring key things that you see that they experience?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, like pre-pandemic, what we would learn from alums in surveys and through the alumni captain outreach is like, y'all prepare us really well for humanities courses. Like we can write a paper, 5 to 7 pages, cite research, fantastic. In STEM courses, even though they feel like they know the content, they
Hmm.
feel like you guys didn't prepare us to use a traditional textbook. So then we get to
Hmm.
college and we're asked to read 7 chapters on our own, and we're like, what? Because our teachers use a lot of like interactive stuff online or their own packets that are sequenced the way they want it. And so that was a really good learning for us to say, we still stick by our curriculum and our modality, but like
Hmm.
we got to show them a textbook every once in a while.
So y'all don't use textbooks? Is
And
that what you're
most
saying?
in most of our STEM courses, we haven't. We use a
Hmm.
lot of technology, and our teachers get really into the right way to like push inquiry at the beginning and then go back to more direct instruction, then release kids again to work in collaborative groups. So we feel like the model is good, but the only courses traditionally we've used textbooks in is like our history courses, our AP US history course. But we're shifting some of that and adopting some textbooks now for calculus and for other courses to prepare kids better for college.
For people who are listening, I want to point out that this is one of those things that when we talk about the charter school advantage in some ways, the ability to pivot on things that you've learned, to say things like, well, we're going to use it more textbooks or not use them because we've learned something important, is something that not all school districts, you can't turn a big institution on a dime oftentimes. And as someone who has watched curriculum adoption processes in districts, it involves a lot of people, sometimes a lot of work. And sometimes it's just easier to keep doing what you've been doing all along, to not do that, to not upset the balance. So it's good to know that you guys are able to turn. Do you have a feedback loop with those colleges where your students are going, where on an ongoing basis you're able to communicate to them kind of how your students are experiencing the colleges? Or is it just like they go to many different colleges and you don't have a feedback loop with all the colleges?
I don't think we have robust ones with all of them, but we've done a really good job to have those feedback loops at schools, with schools where our students have matriculated over the past several years. And we have a small but mighty network college team. There are only 3 of them at the network office. So they are major advocates and like hustlers on behalf of our kids. They make sure that all of our kids' brilliance is able to shine on the page. And so I feel like they do a lot of good work with colleges on the front end before kids match to them. And then also when a new class is coming in, they can also get that feedback on how is last year's cohort doing? What are, here are some of the things they're sharing with us about your institution. And can you share with us some things that you're seeing in our cohort of DP kids, what they're really successful at, maybe some places that they're struggling. So I think there is a group of colleges, probably like 20 to 25 colleges that we have really close relationships with. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And you have a team of 3 people, just 3 people working on that?
Yeah. Well, we have college counselors at the school level. So in each of our 7 high schools, there's teams of 2 or 3. But at our network office, it's only 3. We're hiring 1 more. It's pandemic life. I can't hire that many staff, but it's a small but mighty team for sure.
So Mama Toya, who's one of the 3 woke aunties from the 3 woke aunties podcast, is watching, and she asks, how are you all preparing students socially and emotionally?
Great question. And I'm assuming that means like since the pandemic started. So I'll talk about that, but then also go pre-pandemic. We are doing as many touch points as we can with students and families right now via Zoom until we relaunch hybrid. And even in the hybrid space, because we have to minimize the number of people in the building and maintain social distancing, we really leverage Zoom meetings with families and one-on-ones with students who need extra social emotional supports, whether it be from a social worker, whether it be from a dean, whether it be from their advisor. We have an advisory system at Democracy Prep, which is really strong, where like one teacher is assigned to like 10 students and they can track their grades and track how they're doing. And this existed pre-pandemic, but we're really able to leverage it now because instead of having to check in on all 100 students you teach at the high school level, you just have your core 10 that you're really responsible for checking on and have one-on-ones with.
Another one of your pillars is culture. And this is the thing that everybody has always said you have to get right. Like if you don't get culture right, the rest of your school is just garbage, right? I don't think we as lay people who don't work like you do every day in schools know what that means necessarily. But I do know you feel it when you visit a school. I visited Democracy Prep. I don't know what year it was. But in the last 13 years, I've visited lots of schools of every different kind, from hippie schools to district schools to, commune schools and just I could tell you some stories about some super experimental schools. You feel a culture in almost all of those forms and
Yeah.
it's sometimes it's a positive culture, sometimes it's not. But how does culture translate though when you spend so much time working on it in person, and then you shift to what you just said, Zoom meetings? And how does that work? How do you transfer culture to virtual? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's hard, but we also have magician teachers, so they're able to make it work. I think a cornerstone of our culture at Democracy Prep has always been like every child is an achiever, right? Like every single child that comes through these doors, like the message they're receiving is like, you will achieve. College
Mhm,
is for
mhm,
you. You can get to
mhm,
college and it is for you. And so I think that has always been true. What we have tried to do during the pandemic is replicate as much as possible our rituals and the way we build community
mm,
in the virtual space. So, for example, we still do town halls every week, K through 12, where kids are coming together in a Zoom community. They're celebrating something. They can talk about an issue that they're thinking about. And instead of it being in a room together where you can feel people's energy like physically and hear what they're laughing at, it's now with a chat feature and thumbs up and like,
mm,
applause.
mhm.
And so we've had to approximate it as best we can, but we really believe those advisory meetings still need to happen. Those town halls still need to happen. Kids still need to get awards and like contribution points and shout outs for the stuff they're doing in their community, even if it's virtual.
Do you have a sense that they are still maintaining peer relationships through Zoom?
I think it's been really hard. I'll admit it, and I think this we've heard this from our college students, our first year college students, or students who are taking a gap year. It's really really hard. They're maintaining it because they're the kings and queens of social networking, right? So they've been
Mhm,
maintaining relationships virtually for years. They're better at it virtually than I am, but when you then have a pandemic where you literally cannot see your friends and engage with them in person the way you normally would, and
mhm.
just have a private conversation about something the way you normally would, that's really, really hard. I think they're leveraging FaceTime. I think they're leveraging their social media networks, TikTok and all the others, to still laugh with each other and have fun with each other. But it's been really difficult.
Yeah, my kids are, anytime someone invites them to do something and we say no, it's like a big deal. It's
Hmm.
like, it's like, oh my God, you're wanting my life to end type of thing.
Yep.
We don't play that mess very much, but we allow more leeway than I would have gotten as a kid to talk back on those things.
Yep. Same.
But we're worried about the screen time thing. We really worried about how much, so we've had to, as parents, all of us have had to be more flexible about things we normally wouldn't allow. So a lot of their social interaction is through social media, and first, people keep inventing new apps that, listen, I'm Gen X. I thought I was still pretty with it. You feel kind of younger than you actually are, but they keep adding new apps to the platforms, and you're
Yep.
thinking, I don't know about that one. Never heard of it. But one thing I read just a day or so ago, and this is kind of an aside. This is definitely an aside for people listening and watching. Two of the kids spend a lot of time on Xbox, like a ton of time on Xbox, and they're talking to their friends on Xbox. And there
Yep.
was a study that just came out that basically said of all the forms of screen time, that's the one that doesn't cause depression
Yeah.
or poor socialization skills. And because you are actively engaged, physical, motor skills, solving problems, going through rooms and all, shooting and all that it actually is positive. And I thought, we are great parents. We are amazing.
Well, now I feel better about Kofi on the Xbox all the
That's
time.
right. That's right. Now I'm like, thank you for the science. I appreciate it. So there was a question here from Michelle Johnson. She says, how do you identify the appropriate teachers to maintain your culture? And do you have a lot of turnover? And this actually, I think, strikes at another one of your democracy prep pillars, which is exemplary talent. Matter of fact, you guys say in you're on your website, you say we are committed to attracting, developing, and retaining exceptional adults to work in and for our schools. Democracy Prep staff members undergo extensive performance reviews. I love this. Receive weekly professional development during the school year. I'd love to know about that because teachers complain. If there is a universal complaint I've heard from educators, it's how poor professional development is.
Yep.
And 3 weeks of intensive professional development in the summer. So to Michelle's question, how are you maintaining the culture? your talent, and do you have turnover?
Yeah. So the hiring piece, like they have to love kids and they have to believe in the brilliance of our kids, period. And we do a lot of scenario work, a lot of stuff in the vetting process to try to tease out, no, really, do you believe these kids can learn? Do you believe our predominantly Black and brown kids are brilliant and can do this work? Like, do you really believe that? So that is part of the hiring process. We also look to belief in pedagogy, staying up to date on pedagogy, always developing yourself, always being prepared for your classroom. And then in terms of the development, the professional development and the development throughout the course of the year is aligned to that. If you believe in kids, you believe in their brilliance, you believe in their voice, that means you need to monitor your interaction with our students and make sure that you are showing that they're valued members of our community, just even in how you speak to them and interact with them. Additionally, you need to show when we're doing professional development sessions or one-on-one coaching that you're prepared for your lesson, you've done your lesson internalization if it's a lesson that we prescribe and provide to teachers, or if it's at the high school level and you're actually iterating and creating some of the curriculum, that you have come with your lesson plans for the next week. You've drafted them, you've thought about timing, pacing, how you're going to maximize instruction, how you're going to differentiate and serve all students in the room. What's your outcome for the lesson and how do you know it? So there's a lot of work that goes into it. And our professional development across the network is really strong. I will say that our teachers have gotten strong professional development, those who have been with us for a number of years. So when I was a principal, they'd give me the surveys and they'd be like, this was whack at the beginning. And like, you didn't scaffold enough. So I still got critical feedback. Even though I know our PDs are pretty strong. And I think that's a good thing. I think our teachers feel super invested and empowered, like to make me be better on their behalf, which is
Yeah, so I actually wonder how they're managing now too, because teachers aren't just educators; they're also family members. They're also people. They have like home lives. Are you having to chill out a little bit on some of the, really intense part of their work of monitoring and evaluating them?
Yeah, so we've definitely we've created like a COVID version of our evaluation tool for this year, because there are some categories of our typical performance evaluation system that we're like, this doesn't apply. I wouldn't be able to collect enough data on this right now. So why would I even hold a teacher to it? But we still have a performance eval system. It's just truncated. And then we've definitely given our leaders autonomy to scale back some of the Wednesday professional development sessions with their staff. If they decide like, actually this week, these groups of students need additional remediation on Wednesday instead, or we need to just give everyone a break and give a lot of asynchronous work for teachers and students to be doing. So we have scaled back or just given the leaders autonomy to scale back professional development if they see fit this year.
So getting back to your theme, the theme of your school, and I don't know if it's a theme, that's probably like a trite word to use, but you have a focus on democracy and preparing, young people to engage in democracy, civic activity. Give us like some ideas of people who have never been to your school and don't know what that means, don't know what it means to prepare young people and have them engage in democracy while they're still high school students. What are some of the artifacts that come out of that, or the processes or whatever? What do kids do at your school that's different than other schools in that area?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. The overarching frame is like, we want to empower students to be change agents. And we also want to like embrace this spirit of collaboration, like amongst all stakeholders. Like that is democracy, putting parents' voice at the center in their own child's education and in what needs to happen in their community. So that's kind of the overarching frame. But we do days of service every year for pre-K through 12 across the network. They go out in their community. The entire school stops. We like take a day off, which is a big thing for democracy prep, to take a day off of instruction. And they plant gardens and they do other service opportunities throughout their city in each of the 5 regions we operate in. And that's instilling in a child at the age of 4 or 5 that like, we take the time to make our community better and to respond to the needs of our community. That's how we are active citizens, is we actively make our community better. We also have get out the vote drives for every grade band every single year. Voter registration matters. The power of the vote matters. Making sure the vote is not suppressed matters. So while we are a nonpartisan organization, we will always, always, always focus on the right to vote for our students, for our families, for our communities, but also for the wider communities they live in. So voter registration is huge. And we've done that virtually this year as well during the pandemic. And then the last thing is we have required civics courses and dispositions that our seniors have to meet in order to graduate. And those include lots of different pieces: published written opinion, advocacy, informed policy monitoring, that kind of stuff that seniors have to do.
I love that part. And I would love to, see at some point, like, you be able to say, like, Senator so-and-so came out of Democracy Prep. Maybe you already can, but, just to be able to say, like, Congressman so-and-so, or, the mayor came out of Democracy Prep. I have a question around how you guys are handling race and things like critical race theory.
Yep. Is that the question?
That is the question.
I was gearing up for that. So look, we put a real stake in the ground around anti-racism at Democracy Prep. We believe deeply that systemic racism is still a problem in this country. Spoiler alert, systemic racism exists and is a major problem in our country. And as an educational institution, we need to take a strong stand on that and be clear with all stakeholders that we are going to actively be a race equity driven organization moving forward. And so that means that we have had discussions with staff, with alums, with our students, with our families about what that means. We've done a lot of co-creation with different working groups spanning different stakeholder groups to put that firm stake in the ground and to make sure it's not Natasha Trivers saying what race equity looks like at Democracy Prep for the next 10 years, but it's really being co-created with our people.
If it was just you, Natasha, it wouldn't be democratic at all. Just so you know.
Exactly.
But you've heard of, I'm sure, that there's another charter school network that isn't yours that has really taken on racial equity work internally to get out of this kind of cold world, ice age of chartering, where it was just really about no excuses, work hard, nose to the grindstone, stand in line, put your finger over your mouth and your lip, call to attention, track, slant. It's like tap dancing in some way, shape, or form. Like, there's too many to go through all of them. But there was a sense that maybe in a lot of communities that was going to become toxic as a key feature of your school if you didn't do some work around race and equity and listen to communities. But when another charter school network took on that work, they were criticized internally from charter school supporters who thought that they were dropping the mission. Have you sidestepped that type of critique, or do you face critique also when you want to address race as a core part of how you guys function?
Yeah, no, I think we've definitely faced that critique, and I think we've heard in different domains sort of the argument that well, if we're focusing on the race equity stuff, is that like a watering down of academics, or is that a watering down of rigor? And I think that's so ridiculous, right? Like if we're teaching our students to be critical thinkers, to be agents in this democracy, to stand up against inequity, to be honest about systemic racism and the ramifications of slavery in this country, all of our students of every racial background, if we're teaching them those things, they're more informed citizens, and they're actually going to be more engaged in their education because we are talking about stuff that they care about and they're reading about and they want to know about. So not only are we then nurturing more academically inclined and academically engaged students, but we're also nurturing more civically engaged students. So it doesn't detract from academics or from our mission about to and through college. It only enhances it.
Yeah. Can I ask you some tough questions now? I feel like I've given you some softballs here. Let's ask you some tough questions, Natasha. I want to ask you about some of the what I consider to be charter school myths. As someone who supports chartering as a process, not necessarily support every charter school
Yep.
Just want to be clear for my audience. I support chartering as a process. I don't necessarily support every charter school. There are some myths that I think that people use against the chartering process and by extension charter schools. Some of them are like include things like they don't accept all kids, that charter schools aren't educating the exact same kids that traditional district schools are educating. So therefore, there's something amiss about the charter model itself. How do you answer the idea that, let's just look at New York. You're in New York. You're in other places too, but let's just stick with New York. You're in New York. Someone would say democracy prep is not educating the same kids that New York City public schools are educating. What's your thought about that?
Yeah. My response to that would just be that we work really hard to recruit families of all types and students of all types. And we put it out front and center that we are a school that educates students with IEPs. We are a school that educates students who are English language learners. We are a school that educates kids who have been retained or over age, all kids. So we put that out in every every community event we attend, every fair for families in terms of schooling. So that's always part of our message, and that's genuinely who we are. We have a pathways program at Democracy Prep, which is for students who require a 12 to 1-to-1 setting, a substantially separate setting. And we've put a ton of resources and an investment into making sure that that program is excellent. And that it prepares students for the next step in middle school or high school that they need. And we've always had consistent.
And you take them at all grades too. That's the other thing. You take kids at all grades. You don't.
Which is hard, right? Like I got board members being like, but our data and and that's always been part of our DNA is like, if we have an open seat, someone moves away and we have an open seat, even in 11th or 12th grade, we fill that seat. So,
another one of the myths, this is one that I find particularly insulting, super insulting. But one of the myths is about the parents. And if I'm being perfectly honest, and I'll say tough questions for tough things, I respect you enough to say tough things to you, sure. Even out of Democracy Prep. You had people associated with Democracy Prep in previous times that I know closely. And we used to have this round and round thing about the fact that the parents are different. That one of the reasons that charter school parents, and this is something that even a person within a charter school would say to me, that the parents are different. Just the fact that they chose the charter schools makes them a better parent. Somehow they're more informed, and I've visited, like I've said, schools, lots of schools in this country. And the idea that the public school parents who choose traditional district schools, for many different reasons, by the way, that all of them are not choosers, or they're the dumb ones. They're the ones who weren't smart enough to go out and choose a charter school, is super insulting to me. And I have worked with parents for many years, right, who had a kid in a charter school and a district school, and sometimes they would switch or whatnot. There's too much nuance of what families are really doing to make this premise. But how would you answer the idea that maybe your parents are somehow just the really super good parents who live in poverty? I don't know how else to describe how dumb it sounds to me even coming out of my mouth, but how would you answer that question?
Every family that I have encountered in every walk of life wants a great education for their child and wants great things for their child. So similar to you, Chris, I find that question to be deeply insulting and obnoxious, because we have parents who want something better for their child, or something different than their current experience is. And they look around and see what the options are. They get informed about the options and they make a choice. And it is deeply insulting to say that families who choose charter are already somehow more educated or more this or more that. It's just not true. Even in my own family, my sister put her son in a district public school, had some success in the beginning, didn't love it after a while, is not super pro charter. So we have tons of debates and arguments over, Thanksgiving dinner every year, but she's now looking at success and Uncommon. She's looking at charters that are close to her, proximal to her, to provide a different option. And she's doing her homework to see which could be the best option. And that's what every family wants for their child.
I think it's funny you mentioned success because they defeat one of the other myths that I hear a lot of. People sometimes say, well, if charter schools are so good, how come rich people aren't putting their kids in these schools?
Yep.
Success has some rich people in its school, right? So, well, there you go. There went another myth. Here's another one. The idea that charter schools take the joy out of learning, that they're like testing mills, that they're just, drill and kill, test prep laboratories, and they take all the joy out of schooling. How would you respond to that if someone was saying that? If you were on a panel and someone was saying about charter schools and you run a network of schools, what would be your response to rebut that charter school myth?
Yeah. I'll be honest, I've seen a few charters that do a little bit too much of the testing focus prep, right? I'm not going to name any or call any out here.
Really?
That's not what I do. I love a not a fighter today. But I think that for Democracy Prep, I can speak for Democracy Prep. If you walk through one of our schools on a typical school day, virtually or in person, and don't see a ton of joy, a ton of teachers respecting the brains and the brilliance of our kids and putting complex work in front of them as a means of a joyful event and activity when those kids can do it, then I would be shocked, right? So there's joy in rigor, there's joy in learning, there's joyful moments and rituals and programs and events we have throughout our school. And we do believe that our students need to demonstrate their proficiency on exams, whether they be our rigorous internal exams, state exams, SAT, ACT, even though they are not the end all be all. And we're looking at lots of test optional schools for our kids too. For now, they are gatekeepers still, and we will prepare every single child who walks through our doors to do well on those gatekeeping exams.
For people who don't really understand, people who are parents don't really understand psychometrics and know everything that a test tells you or whatnot. We talked a little bit about this earlier in the discussion, but I want to come back to it just to ask, the idea that these tests do tell you something and that they're not just some sort of performative thing that we put kids through. What's the real educator understanding of preparing kids to take the test? Is it preparing them just to do well on the test so you're teaching some tricks? Or is it that you're actually preparing them by teaching them so they understand content so that when they take a test, they can demonstrate it? How should we as lay people on the outside of schools really understand the way that you all as educators see value? Or I want to step away from the folks who don't see value, but how do you all see value in them?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Chris. I would say 95% of our strategy is teaching the content and the critical thinking that we believe is rigorous curriculum that is worthy of our students. And then they're going to do well on the test. I do think there's 5% that's we do want to teach our kids getting ready for an SAT that this is how the test writers think. This is how they're creating that distractor. They're creating a distractor to try to distract you, to make you pick it. This is how you can analyze that and kind of know that and not fall prey to that. So I do think that is worthwhile too for 5% of the time to build that into an explicit SAT prep course, which we offer for free to all of our juniors. That's part of it, is teaching those test taking techniques, but it's a very small percentage of how we're spending our time.
I was about to say, if it was just so easy to test prep kids and teach them tricks, then every school district would do it.
Yeah.
Right. If you had a perennially low scoring school, you would just say, hey, let me get this magic voodoo. It's called test prep. If we just put the test prep spell on them, they'll pass all these. I look at our state test as a parent in Minnesota. They put samples out and I go and look at them to see if they update them or change them, because I feel a little bit, as somebody talks about this work all the time, a little bit disconnected from how schools are using that and everything. And every time I look at them and I read them, I'm like, I don't understand how reading this passage and being asked to comprehend certain parts of it is something that you can test preppy your way through necessarily, right? There's some of the stuff you can't just trick yourself through. You have to have been taught, at some point.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think there's a worthwhile argument to be made that if you're spending too much time, if you're stopping school, regular instruction in March, and then doing 2 months or
Mm,
3 months of test prep, that even though you can't game the system, still kids are still practicing passages and they're practicing reading comprehension. That you're still kind of sucking the joy out of school a little bit, and
yeah.
also potentially making kids too focused on this one standardized test as opposed to like love life and love learning and like show what you know, like that more kind of authentic way. I do think there's a worthy argument to be made for like not doing the 2 or 3 months of test prep. But I agree with you, Chris, that just by putting these exams in front of our kids and expecting them to show their best, that's not somehow trickery. That is just putting
Well,
it
and let's be real. There are some more advantaged kids. We never talk about the test prep that they get.
right.
Like, they're getting high scores, but we never talk about the fact that, they are also being prepared to take those tests.
Yep.
And some of them are paying for that preparation
Yep.
for those tests. So if we're getting it for free, it's not a punishment. It's actually a service if you're getting it for free.
Totally.
As we wrap, I just want to ask you a couple of quick questions around like, your status, in the work that you do. Do you feel like you get as a woman of color leading in this field that oftentimes is not the most progressive? Do you feel that like you're given all your roses? You feel like you're given all the accolades that you should get, all the support that you should have, all the belief in your leadership that you should have?
Chris with the hard questions with 4 minutes to go. I I don't feel like I should get all the roses that I should. Definitely not from potential funders and other powers that be, other people who deem certain charter networks good and others as
Mhm.
But I think I get it in powerful ways from people that matter. I get it from the citizen stewards of the world. I get it from
Absolutely.
I get it from our students, our alums, our educators who are so excited about the fact that multiple voices are at the table now at Democracy Prep, shaping the future for our kids who are quite brilliant and are deserving of all of our time. So,
Yeah, that was diplomatic. That was sweet and diplomatic, and it is towards the end of the show to talk about it. But I will say this: the field has to do better. Education is a field. Chartering is a field, and each field has a system of rules and funding options and ways that people move in the field. If we want more people of color and women of color and educated people to come into the field, and by the way, a field that gets not just a little bit of criticism for not being in touch with our communities,
yep.
we have to stop being silent about it when we have some of the same problems that nonprofits had maybe 20, 30 years ago, where the leadership was usually white and the people of color were really the face of things or going out and doing things. So it's not to put you on the spot, but it's to say, I'm sure that you are adjacent to someone who is watching you or who is in proximity to you, who might want to be you one day.
Yep.
Or might want to know the secret to your success and how you're doing this and making it work. And I want that person to know that it will be a fair world when they want to do what you do.
Yeah. And I think to that point, Chris, there's a lot of work to be done to make sure that that's true. And I think people of color in positions of power in the education field need to do more work to sort of like, let's look back to the people behind us that are coming up and make sure that they have an easier road than we're having right now. So I think that's such an important question and point, and something I want to think about too, of how are we paving the way for other education leaders of color to come behind us?
I think you should come back and we should talk about this on a show. One, because I think it's important because we're adjacent to people who we never know who's watching, who might one day want to do what we do. Two, you and I have I think a similar type of pathway in that, I took over an organization from its founder, who was a white male founder who is very supportive of me, by the way, like super supportive of me in many ways, but you're still taking over something from someone else and you're a person of color coming in new. And I'm male See, this is the other thing too. So there might be we might have a very interesting conversation about this, but at the end of the day, what we for sure want, we want more people of color coming from communities, hopefully out of democracy prep, who will add to the democracy by running schools, by starting schools and being school leaders.
Absolutely. And being amazing teachers and master teachers for time too, but absolutely for school
principals, curriculum developers, college coaches. If we start generating our own, we can stop acting as if education is something that's done to us, but it's actually done through us, right? Absolutely. Which is amazing. So, Natasha, thank you so much for coming on today. I think this has been an amazing conversation. People in the comments are really excited about your school. Tell people how they can find you. We've had, by the way, for people listening and watching, we've had Natasha's Twitter handle and Democracy Prep's Twitter handle going across the bottom of the screen. But any other ways that they can contact you, and anything that you want to promote that folks should be watching out for?
Absolutely. Would love for you to check us out at our website, democracyprep.org. And then specifically, if you want to check out our civics work, that would be civics.democracyprep.org. There's a lot of great stuff there, a lot of great Black History Month programming that we did, and a lot of civics work that is integrally tied to our anti-racism work as well. So please check us out.
Excellent. Thank you again for coming on. For everybody watching, this has been an hour with Natasha Trivers. She's the CEO of Democracy Prep Schools in, I'm going to say in New York, but in New York, San Antonio, Nevada, Baton Rouge.
And
did I miss one?
Did you say Camden? New York, Camden.
And Camden. That was the other one. San Antonio. And Camden. Yeah. So a network of schools that has 6,500 or more students, which, as I said at the top of the hour, is double the size of the average American school district. So this is a real success story. It's a fully scaled operation that is serving students well and engaging them in democracy and making tomorrow a little bit